bananas used to be a very precious fruit in East Asia. In the 1970s, a banana cost the same as a 5-kilogram bag of sugar, and in the 1980s, a banana cost $1 when the average laborer earned about $400 per month. Even in 19th century America, bananas were a very expensive fruit. As a soft fruit, bananas had a short shelf life, so they couldn't be imported in large quantities until refrigerated ships were used for trade. By the 20th century, however, bananas had become the most commonly eaten tropical fruit in the United States. Elvis Presley was one celebrity who loved bananas, and he was very fond of a sandwich made with bread spread with peanut butter, followed by bacon, bananas, and lots of honey. Also known as the Elvis sandwich, it was quite fashionable in its day, even for the public. But Americans had no idea that bananas were the product of the exploitation of the people of the so-called banana republics. As it turns out, bananas have been a pretty imperialistic fruit for a long time. Bananas were a staple food for Africans working on sugar plantations on the North Atlantic islands of Madeira and the Canary Islands, and later, during the 18th century slave trade, they were often fed to Africans crossing the Pacific Ocean. When they arrived in the Americas, African slaves were forced to grow bananas in a field in the corner of the plantation where they were working. In the right climate, bananas were a cheap food that yielded more than 100 times the yield of potatoes per acre, making them an ideal fruit for slave-owning plantation owners. By the turn of the 19th century, bananas were about to change the fortunes of several nations. Because the United States created countries in Central America that focused solely on growing bananas. It all started in Costa Rica. Originally, Costa Rica was the first country in Central America to have a coffee industry. The problem was that there was no way to get the coffee from the Central Mountains to the ports. Not having the money to build a railroad through the jungle, Costa Rica approached American businessman Minor Keith in the late 19th century to build a railroad. In exchange, the country gave Keith the land around the railroad, which was a massive 7% of Costa Rica's total territory. Here, Keith planted bananas to feed the railroad workers cheaply, much like the black slaves I mentioned earlier. This was the beginning of the banana plantation. Coincidentally, there was a banana boom in the US, so Keith planted bananas all over the land he received from Costa Rica and made a lot of money. Keith then formed the United Fruit Company with his associates, which nearly monopolized the banana business in Central America. This company would later become Chiquita. It is one of the three major players in the global fruit market, along with Dole and Del Monte. After a successful experiment in Costa Rica, American entrepreneurs set out to find a site in Central America for their next super-scale banana plantation. Honduras was chosen. At one time, 50% of the country's land was planted with bananas, and 65% of Honduran exports were bananas. Later, the bananas caused many Hondurans to go hungry because there wasn't enough land to farm, and all the money from the exports went to American companies, which didn't benefit the Honduran people. As a result, the term Banana Republic was first used to refer to Honduras. Banana republics are a derogatory term for puppet states in Central and South America that are under the absolute influence of the United States. They have in common that they are economically dependent on the export of one or two agricultural products, such as bananas, are effectively controlled by foreign capital, and are ruled by corrupt politicians with ties to U.S. corporations. U.S. corporations controlled virtually everything in the banana republics, including the country's politics, economy, and judiciary. If a politician opposed to U.S. interests came to power, the Pentagon stepped in and took care of it. In 2006, reform-minded Manuel Zelaya was elected president of Honduras. During his presidency, he reduced extreme poverty by 21%, making him popular with the entire country. However, when he tried to reduce the privileges of U.S. corporations, the U.S. government behind the scenes manipulated a military coup to remove him from power. The Honduran government was once referred to as the Pentagon government. Guatemala was even worse than Honduras. At one point, 80% of its land was banana plantations for U.S. companies. When José Arevalo, who was elected president in 1940, tried to institute land reforms to address this problem, the U.S. again staged a coup to remove him. In the 1950s, Jacobo Arbenz, a former science teacher who promised to give the land back to the people, became president. At the time, President Eisenhower and the CIA claimed he was a communist and immediately set out to overthrow the regime, causing 200,000 deaths. The Banana Massacre in Colombia is also infamous. In 1928, banana plantation workers for the United Fruit Company of Colombia went on strike. Their demands were fairly simple: an 8-hour work a day, a 6-day a week, more washrooms, and payment in cash. They were particularly unhappy about the coupons they were receiving instead of cash. Workers in Colombia had to use the coupons to buy expensive U.S. produce and products at stores run by U.S. banana companies. The striking workers were also labeled as communists, and the United States threatened to send in the Marines if the Colombian government didn't put down the communists quickly. Afraid of a U.S. invasion, the Colombian government eventually sent in the troops, resulting in a massacre that left up to 4,000 people dead. Although the scale of the events varied somewhat, these tragedies occurred in most Caribbean countries, including Cuba, Dominica, Haiti, Panama, and Nicaragua. In recent years, the concept of a banana republic has been expanded. It's not just Latin American countries, it's countries that rely on one or two industries to survive, and there are a surprising number of them. In Ghana, cocoa accounts for 80% of the economy, in Zambia, copper accounts for 87% of the economy, and in Nigeria, one of the world's most unequal countries, oil accounts for 99% of the economy. Madagascar, whose entire economy depends on vanilla, the ingredient in Coca-Cola, could collapse if Coca-Cola fails. Other banana republics include Bangladesh for jute, Laos for timber, Sri Lanka for Ceylon tea, Botswana and Zimbabwe for diamonds, Ivory Coast for cocoa, and the Democratic Republic of Congo for coltan. The most dangerous moment for these banana republics is when something dramatic happens to the crops or minerals they are totally dependent on, and it's already happened to bananas. We only know yellow bananas, but originally they came in green and purple, and tasted tart as well as sweet. For commercial cultivation to maximize profits, banana companies planted only the yellow Gros Michel variety, which was the most delicious, in plantations around the world, creating the perception that bananas are yellow. However, the banana industry was once devastated by the spread of Panama disease, a fungus that grows on bananas. This led to the less flavorful, but Panama disease-resistant Cavendish variety of bananas making up 95% of all bananas, and it will probably happen again someday. However, the banana republics of Central and South America are already going through hell even before this catastrophe. Honduras has 60% of its population living in poverty. Add to that the presence of U.S. drug gangs, and the murder rate is one of the highest in the world, and it's women and children who suffer the most. In Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala, a woman is murdered every 18 hours. These are some of the most unsafe countries in the world, with femicide rates that exceed epidemic levels as defined by the World Health Organization. Every year, hundreds of thousands of people from these banana republics flee their countries because they can't stand the poverty and the threat to their lives, and their paths keep leading to one place, the U.S. border with Mexico. Which means, the atrocities of the United States are boomeranging back at them.